on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham, and this week, it's Thursday already, we're joined by the Executive Director of Outlier Media, which is an online publication and a partner of WDET, Orlando Bailey. Welcome back to the show. It's a Thursday.
I can't believe it's already Thursday. It's been such a great time sitting across from you, Tia Graham.
And Orlando, you've made it like a breeze to work with this week. It's been really easy. You've been able to get things just flow and get things done. I'm just like, oh my gosh.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Listen, today on the program, a group of students, Detroit students, went to Ghana to participate in a debate competition with Ghanaian students. We'll talk about that competition and what the students learned from the trip.
Really looking forward to that. Plus, the Democratic National Convention has been going on all week, and it's been an interesting past few days. We'll hear more about it from WDET's Russ McNamara later in the show. But first up, in America, we sometimes measure history by whether we're making social progress. Is the country becoming more inclusive? Is it growing more equal? My parents were children when their parents, my grandparents, gained the right to legally vote in this country. My mom talked about going with her mom when she was just a little girl to vote for that first time. So it's not too far in the past. I know. That has had consequences for our political system. More women and people of color now run and hold higher office. However, that's to say that the past isn't some moment entirely separate from the present. The actions of our ancestors bleed into the decisions we make now, and often the actions of previous generations to create a less equal country have made our country less equal today. That's part of what Tracy McMillan argues in her book, The White Bonus, where she explores generational wealth and why white Americans tend to have a lot more than others do. In a recent article in the Detroit Free Press, Tracy explores the story of Ferndale's segregated schools and how her own personal story fits into it, how her parents' decision impacted her own life outcomes, and the ways that it's woven into a broader story about American inequality. To discuss it now, we have Tracy McMillan here. Tracy, welcome to the Metro.
Good morning, Tia. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So when did you start to question your own family's involvement or movement from Oak Park, the Ferndale area, onwards?
Honestly, I hadn't thought about it too much. My family moved to Holly when I was about 4.5 years old. And the whole time I was growing up, right, we said, we had to move for the schools. And we wanted more space. And, the schools were part of it. And so I grew up thinking, this is Holly in the 1980s, that I had moved there because there were really good schools and where we had left was not good schools, right? And so actually when I started reporting the White Bonus, I thought that I was going to find a story of, okay, we moved from a failing district to one that was really well funded and was a good school system, which is a little weird. I ended up going to a private university, so I had some understanding that my education wasn't at the level of a lot of my peers. Mm-hmm. But I thought, okay, I'm going to find Holly was great and the place we left was not good. And when I started digging into it, right, it was actually the inverse, right? Ferndale, when my family left in 1981, was actually a very solidly performing district, still is, right, to my understanding. But Holly was not, right? Holly was a poor rural area with an underfunded public school system, so underfunded it was actually in danger of losing accreditation at the high school.
So you talked about digging in and looking back a little bit. So you wrote in there, starting in 1968, the school district of the city of Ferndale began to receive letters from the Office for Civil Rights at the Federal Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, flagging concerns about segregation. What surprised you the most when you began reporting on the numbers regarding integration within that area?
I mean, first of all, to understand how severe the white flight was, growing up in northern Oakland County, I understood white flight as something that was about violence in the cities in Detroit, and we couldn't go there because it wasn't a good place, it wasn't safe. And actually, much of the white flight was about schools, right? It was happening before there were the uprisings and folks were leaving. So Ferndale schools in 1968 was 9% black and 90% white. They were the first northern district sued by the feds for operating a segregated district, right? This was an instance of making an example of a northern district to show that it wasn't just in the South. And then when my family moved out, right, Holly was something like that school district's population was something like 98% white, right? So I think there was a lot going on where my parents were conflating the assumption that because we were moving out to a white place, it was going to be good. And the fact that Oak Park and Ferndale were starting to integrate residentially meant that they weren't going to be good schools going forward. And for me, the thing that was shocking was to understand what a large public story this was, how open history this was and how much my family never talked about it, honestly.
That's really something to think about, movement without speaking and without explanation. Most people look at Ferndale today and they see Ferndale as a fairly progressive place, but you write in 1973, Ferndale became the first Northern District to lose funding for refusing to integrate its schools. How costly was racism for Ferndale back then?
Well, local journalists at the time put the number at about $2 million over, several years. I mean, this is the thing. Like, it's not like Ferndale was operating a segregated district. And really, it was just one school, right? They had Grant Elementary, which now has a historic marker about this. Grant Elementary was it was all Black students. Almost every Black elementary student in Ferndale at the time went to this one school. It's not like they were like, oh, you caught us. Okay, we'll fix it. They fought it for 13 years and basically gave up their vocational education programs to prolong segregation in the district. And it took actually like a shift in who was on a federal court bench to somebody who was more friendly to the idea of integration and said, no, you're not going to do integration by making the Black families suffer all of the logistical burdens of this. You have to make this equitable, and you have to actually integrate the district. And it took 13 years, right? So they integrate the classes in January 1981. The Free Press actually runs a big story about integration gets an A on June, I think it was like 12th, 1981, and my family moved to Holly on June 13th, and I start kindergarten in Holly that fall.
Talk to me about this conversation that never happened with your parents. But before we do that, if you're just joining us, we're chatting with Tracy McMillan. We're discussing her most recent article in the Free Press. I thought my parents moved to Holly for the schools. I was wrong. Mm-hmm. At the core of this, at the bedrock of this, is this quiet racism from your parents? Is this fear of the unknown and integration from your parents? What do you posit that it was back then?
I mean, I think it's a little of all the above. I think in my family, the dynamic is not so much like we want to leave because we don't want to be around Black people. That's not how my family thinks about it. But I do think in my family, there's an understanding that like, well, this is going to be a mess. I mean, when you think much of my family is from Pontiac, right? And you had 10 school buses blown up by the Klan, right, over integration plans there, right? You had like a national sort of movement against busing for school integration that started actually in Pontiac, not in Boston, but in Pontiac, right? There's this huge dust up. So I think for my family, there's this assumption like, well, that's going to be a mess. And we sort of understand that, when there are more people who aren't white around, often there's not as much support for things publicly. So we're just going to get out of here and not mess with it, right? Which I think is really a divestment from the idea that we're all in this together, right? So because my family could have stayed and been like, all right, we're going to be part of this community and make sure it gets sort of handled well. And there's this assumption, I think, for some white families, certainly in mine, that the institutions will probably be just fine for us. So we don't need to fight or worry about everybody else. And we're just going to sort of put our head down and make sure we do what's easiest for us.
And, I think it's also important to note that the Brown versus Board of Education decision came out in 1954. Mm-hmm. And the enforcing of this decision was still trying to happen even here in the state of Michigan in the 1970s on into the 1980s. What do you make of that?
I think white people really didn't want to give up having resources all to themselves, and when we're talking about things like the affirmative action of generational wealth, right, I think it's really important to understand that the roots of it are in fights like this, right? White students were being given tools for social mobility, and Black students were not, in ways where white communities were very aggressive about trying to say, this is just for us and we don't want to share, right? And I think that's sort of what you see in this period of Ferndale schools. I think now, right, there is a motion to sort of correct that and to make sure this country lives up to its ideals. But for a long time, I think there was the sort of the quiet racism for a lot of white families, I think, was just this assumption that these resources are for us. And if it's going to a person who's not white, we need them to prove that they deserve it because we know we deserve it, but we're not sure these other people do.
So, Tracy, as well with your book that you recently released, The White Bonus, 5 Families and the Cash Value of Racism in America, if you can help us unpack this a little bit, how did it help inform the recent writing that you did with the FREEP?
Yeah, so, I mean, this piece I did for the Free Press is born out of the reporting I did for the White Bonus. There's a short section about this in there, but I was really grateful to Nancy Capper at the Free Press for being open to having me really dig into this, right? This is not a history that was clearly written out anywhere, and I had to sort of piece it together through newspaper clippings. I went up to the archives at not at Bentley, but at the Michigan Library in the state capitol, and sort of was pulling out court documents and figuring this stuff out. And it's so interesting because when you dig into it, you see how much this change in Ferndale relied on government intervening and saying, this is not right. We need to make sure that this district is giving everybody an equal chance. And for me, that was really powerful as I reported the White Bonus to sort of understand how important government involvement has been in making sure we all live up to our country's ideals.
Can you talk about where your consciousness comes from? I mean, the op-ed that you posted in the Freep was biographical also in nature. You talked about your grandparents' usage of the N-word and your parents moving to Holly to just sort of not have to face and deal with it. But here you are naming it, you are putting it all out there. Where did this consciousness come from?
Well, some of that's just because I was sort of like a lower middle class kid going to a private university on the East Coast, and I was sort of navigating race and class constantly because I worked in public schools sort of alongside my studies. And so I was sort of going from, very low income urban neighborhoods and then at school with upper middle class kids and then worked for like rich folks as a nanny in the evenings, right? So I saw a lot of that and also understood very much how the resources I had access to were different from the people I was with. And then just having a lot of exposure to lots of different kinds of people, right? I think for me, reporting the White Bonus, right, which is half memoir and half sort of profiles of other white people, I just really wanted to figure out how to talk about race and class at the same time where I could acknowledge how hard economically it is for a lot of white people, often including me, while also being able to acknowledge how unfair and sort of racist a lot of our policies and structures have been in this country, right? Because certainly as a lower middle class person growing up, I had a hard time, but it's not the same kind of hard time that folks who don't have the benefit of sort of white advantage have going on. And so for me, right, doing the White Bonus was a way to figure out how to talk about that and be in the world so that I can sort of be helpful, right, in pushing us towards living up to our ideals.
It's the perfect springboard here. About 30 seconds left. What do you think are some good ways or more inclusive ways that white people can come into this conversation and actually help move it along?
Yeah, well, I think some of it's just being open to listening, right, and understanding that just because a white person has a hard time economically, it's not the same thing as having had your parents and grandparents, not only subject to racial violence, right, but being written out of protections like minimum wage law. Right, the first part of the minimum wage really didn't cover most jobs with Black people. That was intentional on the part of government. Right, so being open to listening, and then just sort of thinking like, well, actually, this isn't just about amorphous privilege, but it translates into money and generational wealth and other kinds of opportunities. And if we're serious about the fact that we're all equal, right, we kind of need to be open to making sure that the policies in government reflect that.
Tracy McMillan is the author of The White Bonus and a Detroit Free Press article titled, "I Thought My Parents Moved to Holly for the Schools. I Was Wrong." Tracy, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro. We would love to have you back to further this conversation.
Thanks, Tia and Orlando. This was awesome.
Yeah.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. Today, partly sunny, a high of 70 degrees expected. Tomorrow, Friday, sunny with a high of 80 degrees. Looking good this weekend. Saturday, 84 degrees and sunny. And Sunday, expect sunshine with a high of 86 degrees.
All right, in the news, a girl suing judge over field trip humiliation. The mother of a Detroit teenager is suing the judge who put her daughter in handcuffs and jail clothes for falling asleep in his court. The girl was part of a field trip when Judge Kenneth King singled her out. He claims she displayed a bad attitude and needed to understand how serious a courtroom is. Her attorneys say King humiliated her and caused severe emotional distress. They're seeking more than $75,000. Wayne County's chief judge temporarily removed King from his docket to receive training.
That's such a traumatizing. Every time I hear that story, it's just so traumatizing to think about. But in other news, we do have the WDET listener survey, which is back. And if you like what you're listening to, you like the stories that you're hearing, let us know. Share your thoughts. We listen to all of them. We read all of them. You can win some really neat WDET swag. It's quick, it's anonymous, and you'll be helping us serve you better. Take the survey now at WDET.org/survey.
All right, coming up, a group of Detroit students went to Ghana to participate in a debate competition with Ghanaian students. We'll talk about that competition and what students learned from the trip. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I am Orlando Bailey. I am the guest co-host alongside Tia Graham here at WDET on the Metro. We are so excited to be coming at you, displaying East Side, West Side diplomacy all week. Listen, there is a new cohort of Detroit students who can now say that they've not only gone out of the country, but traveled all the way to Ghana on the continent of Africa for a cultural immersion experience. The trip was the grand prize to students in the Umoja Debate League that won the middle school and high school debate tournaments in early summer. Students had the opportunity to explore the country and celebrate the similarities and differences they share with Ghanaian youth and even debate them on salient issues. Umoja Debate League is a nonprofit that works with Detroit schools to bring debate programming to students. Joining us in the studio is Jerjuan Howard, the founder and executive director of Umoja Debate League, and student debate champs Taureen Mitchell-Campbell, a recent graduate of Henry Ford High School, and Raeghan Stinson, an 8th grader at Bates Academy. Yeah. Jerjuan, Taureen, and Raeghan, welcome to the Metro.
Hi.
Man, happy to be here.
Really happy to have you all here. Can't wait to get into it. T is excited over there.
I love
Big
when
smiles.
the kids are on the show.
Me too.
Kids are the future. I
They
believe
are
the
the
children
future.
are the future.
That's right. And we're going to turn it right over to them. But first, Jerjuan, tell us a little bit more about Umoja Debate League and its mission.
Man, absolutely. So Umoja Debate League is a nonprofit organization that was founded about 3 years ago with the goal to teach Detroit youth conflict resolution, critical thinking skills, and overall confidence. We do this through a competitive format. We have schools that compete against each other at a law school on Saturdays on a variety of different topics. And here we have the champions who won the 2024 After School Debate Season Championship.
Yeah, I love it. Tell us how it came to be that a trip to Africa would be the grand prize for the debate teams who won the championship.
So at Umoja, we believe that education is, multifaceted. And we wanted to make sure that the award wasn't just a trophy, but an experience, something that they can take with them for the rest of their lives. And our grants operations manager, Taylor James, had this bright idea to take the kids to Ghana for the cultural immersion, for the historical context, for everything else that, the connectivity between us and the Ghanaian people. And that's where it kind of started, and we kind of made it happen from there.
Wow, that is
I love it.
It's amazing, right? I
Yep.
love it. Taureen, congratulations on recently graduating from Henry Ford High School. Congratulations to you. Tell us what debate and this trip to Ghana has taught you about yourself.
So debating in the Umoja Debate League, it kind of taught me about myself that I'm really passionate about political science, and especially when it comes to our people, Black people, and stuff like that. And when we went to Ghana, it was just going there, it just touched my heart.
Yeah, I know. I put my hand here. Yes.
Yeah, it was just an experience meeting all the kids, talking to them, sharing our experiences from back home, and then comparing it and just seeing how they live. You know what I'm saying? It was very eye-opening.
Raeghan, was there anything you learned in Ghana that surprised you?
That it's a world full of entrepreneurs over there.
Yeah.
I didn't expect to see as many as I saw, but I was like, oh, okay, so we lit over here.
We lit over here. Oh, man. You know, I learn new vernacular every time I talk to young people. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Jerjuan Howard, the founder and executive director of Umoja Debate League, with student debate champs Taureen Mitchell-Campbell and Raeghan Stinson about their recent immersion trip to Ghana. Jerjuan, as one of the stewards of this experience for the student champs, what came up for you watching the Detroit students experience Ghana?
Man, it was so many different parallels. Raeghan kind of touched on it a little bit, but that hustler's mentality that we often kind of champion here in Detroit, that we're some hustlers, we can go get it. Ghanaians are the same exact way. So again, just so many different parallels. The way that I seen mothers interact with children was the same exact way that I seen here. I seen some brothers sitting outside the barber shop. I probably seen that same image on 7 Mile, man. So just seeing, again, from my Detroit lens to be in Ghana, so many similarities, even though we're on other parts of the world, was amazing to me. And for the kids to see that as well was, I think, important, extremely important for the connectivity of the whole entire diaspora.
That's perfect, because that's one of the questions I was going to ask to both of you. Just the experience of being in a space, in a place where you aren't considered, I guess you can say, Black per se. Like everyone there around you is that. So it's just like you are in a space, being in a place where people have never truly experiences that idea of I am just this Black person, but I am in a place, in a space where I am with all of my brothers and sisters. So what did it feel like to experience being in a place where Black people are the majority?
Well, definitely for me, I can say that it felt like home. I would say it felt really homey, and you could feel all the love. Like, it was just, everybody was interested. It was just so many questions that we all had to ask each other. Like, we kind of did, because we were staying at a hotel at the time, and we had to go to like another school to debate them and, you know, interact with them. They couldn't get us back on the bus. You get what I'm saying? Like, it was a very hard time. It was just so much fun, and it was like just all awesome and just amazing. Like, it was just, I have so many words.
I know.
Raeghan, the feeling when you got off the plane and into the city and in the villages.
I was really scared of mosquitoes because I heard they were like really big. So I was like, take me home. So like, when I got there, I was glowing. I had a little glow, and I was like, it's lit over here. I was so happy. But like, you learn so much stuff over there. Like, when we got to conversate with the students, we were like, do you get racism over here? They was like, no, the closest thing is colorism. And it's like being in a community where you're not like considered one of them, because I know some people say African and Black people are two different things. It was like, we're alike, but we're not exactly the same. So it was fun to learn about.
Yeah, we're not a monolith, right? That's huge in learning. You know, Taureen, we heard that the American students got to debate the Ghanaian students. What was the debate topic, and how did it go? Did y'all win?
Okay.
Who won?
So the debate topic was, should Accra, Ghana, the city that we went to, and Detroit become sister cities. So in this debate, we learned a lot about, you know, the cities as a whole. Like, you know, we known as the Motor City over here. So are they. You get what I'm saying? Like, they do a lot of stuff with engineering and cars and
just learn
stuff.
that.
You're right. The more you know. You know, they just do a lot of engineering and stuff like that, which is what I was into. So it was kind of a real connect. So yeah, I did win the debate. I went against. I did win the debate, and so yeah, me and my partner, we basically just went on the point of it was a lot for both cities and both cultures to exchange and learn from each other. So that's just the point that we played on and, you know, put down the most, you know what I'm saying? So it brought us the win.
Yeah. And the same thing, Raeghan, did your experience in Ghana change you? And if so, how it did? You already told us multiple times it was lit. It was lit. You were glowing.
I think that's going to be with the post on the website. It was lit.
It was lit.
It was lit.
So Raeghan, how was it?
I really enjoyed it. I personally didn't get to debate, but like me and my partners, we were really in sync, and we got to meet this wonderful girl named Na. She was an amazing debater for it to be her first time. Like, all the Ghanaian students were very good for their first time. And we were like, oh, yeah, you got to do this, this, that. And between that time, because we had a lunch break, and they were still working, and we was like, okay, so y'all got it. Just come on over here with us.
I love it. Did you all make forever friends?
Yes, I still talk to my Ghana friends to this day. I was texting them before we got here.
Wow. Yeah. What about you, Reagan?
I made a couple.
Yeah.
I didn't get any information to keep in contact, but I think if I were to ever go back, I would definitely seek out to find them.
You never know. It's a small world. You never really know. You might run into them tomorrow or in 10 years, but it's an experience that you will never forget. And before we let you go, I just wanted to ask you, as you were over there in Ghana, you're learning, you're picking up all this information. You're ambassadors for the city of Detroit now in terms of being global travelers.
Say that to you.
What are some things and what ways did you share your Detroit-esque swag with the people in Ghana? So we're going to start with you, Reagan.
We were basically telling them like how it was like really developed over here. So if you were to come over here, it wouldn't be anything like here. And the thing is, over there, everything's natural. Yeah. Like, I think that was why. I think that's why I was glowing.
Yeah. Same thing, Taureen.
Well, I would say, well, the way that kind of put them in like the Detroit mode, it was like before we debated, we got in a huddle, because I'm a football player, so I'm all about camaraderie and stuff like that. So we did a little chant, and we got hype and stuff, and then we went on the stage, and they was just feeding off of the energy. So it was like wasn't much that we really had to say because everybody was just so connected.
Jerjuan Howard, founder and executive director of Umoja Debate League, along with student debate champs Taureen Mitchell-Campbell and Raeghan Stinson on their trip to Africa. Thank you all for joining us here on the Metro.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. Orlando, that was one of the most delightful conversations we've had on the show this week.
Oh, man, I'm smiling from ear to ear.
I know, my cheeks hurt. It was so great to listen to them talk about that experience. I have to go. Have you been before?
No, I've not.
All right, I'm on my way then. We're on our way. Yep.
All right.
Coming up next, paid sick leave will be mandated in the state of Michigan. We'll talk with someone about the importance of this policy and why she's been advocating for it. You all stay right there. It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I am Tia Graham. Here with us this week is the executive director of Outlier Media, Orlando Bailey. That conversation, once again, I'm still glowing from that conversation. But the next topic that we have on the show is also going to be a very important topic that we have to discuss.
Yeah, we don't often discuss the state Supreme Court on the Metro, but last month they had a big ruling. Essentially, the court's judges decided that Michigan workers will have paid sick leave by February. Earlier this week, we spoke with the head of the Small Business Association about why some businesses oppose the decision, and now we want to turn to an advocate of paid sick leave. Danielle Atkinson is the founder director of Mothering Justice, a nonprofit that works to empower mothers of color. She's been a big advocate for paid sick leave. Danielle, welcome back to the Metro.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're happy to have you. Listen, you've been pushing for paid sick leave. Why does paid sick leave matter, and why should Michigan workers have access to it?
Yeah, I think everyone who has ever been sick and had to go to work knows why it's important, right? Mm-hmm. We unfortunately do not have a society that values being well and healing and the role of caregiving. So, you wake up with the flu and you have to think, can I afford to take the day off? Or your child is in the hospital and you're like, I have to leave. Hopefully the procedure goes well, Mm-hmm. And this has been deeply personal for me. And I know it's deeply personal for so many people because my mother had cancer. She got cancer right after the Family Medical Leave Act passed. So the Family Medical Leave Act provides protection, job protection for when you need to take time off for a long-term illness, but it doesn't pay. So that means that it's out of reach for most people. So you can get 6 weeks of job protection. Your job will be there, but you won't get any money and you won't be able to make ends meet. And so I remember my mother going through chemotherapy, sick, vomiting, and she was a nurse, right? So she was pouring into other people while she didn't have enough time to get well herself. And so it's been deeply personal, and to be able to influence legislation, being able to be with moms and actually be able to identify an issue that's affecting their financial stability, also their mental well-being, was just so amazing. And it was an amazing campaign.
Speaking of mothers, you advocate for mothers, and specifically mothers of color. Who does paid sick leave matter specifically to mothers of color around Michigan?
Yeah, because this, like most issues of economic stability, disproportionately affects women caregivers. And so when we're talking about who has access to paid leave on the job, it's not going to be, you're most likely not going to be talking about the people that are caring for the most amount of people, that the people who community goes to first when they need somebody to pick up a kid from school. And also, legislation is also written in a very Eurocentric way. And so when we're talking about who is caring for who, we're not only talking about blood and legal relations, we're talking about affinity. We're talking about the person, the grandmother down the block that's not really your grandma. We're talking about the auntie that, it can check in on somebody when you're at work. And so we wanted to write that into legislation. We wanted to write in our values and how we live as a people. And when you do that, you're talking about women of color.
If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Danielle Atkinson. She is the founding director of Mothering Justice. We're talking about what it will mean for Michiganders now that paid sick leave will be mandated for Michigan workers. Okay, there are some businesses that don't want paid sick leave here. Is Small Business Association President Brian Calley discussing why this law hurts businesses?
There's a provision within this law which essentially makes it very difficult to just operate the schedule of a business. So, for example, employees would have a 3-day no-call, no-show allowance each year. So they could just not show up, not call, not say anything for 3 days. And as long as they show up on the 4th day, they can just say sick time, and the business may not take any action whatsoever to address that no call, no show, because it's explicitly allowed in the law, and the business is forbidden from even asking for a reason why the person didn't show up for 3 days.
So Calley is essentially saying that this law will allow employees to not communicate with their bosses, and that it will slow down the daily functions of a business and may even destroy the company. What do you make of that argument, Danielle?
Well, first, bless his heart.
Bless his heart.
Bless it, okay? Because when I spoke to this man, he talked to me about how, well, we didn't speak. We were being interviewed simultaneously. And he said, the people at my job, they just don't get sick.
Oh.
I said, or they fear telling you. Okay. And it's about what is the relationship you have with your employees. If your employees value their job and they value that experience, and they feel like this is a place where I can not only get paid and care for my family in that way, this employer cares about me and I can care for my family in the way that they rely on me the most, right? And instead of saying, let's prepare these employers to have this law go into effect, they've been fighting it for 8 years. Could you imagine if we had 8 years of the Small Business Association preparing and training employers on how to have these conversations? I run a business. Mothering Justice is a business. We have folks call out all the time, unexpected things. Nobody.
Me too. I
right?
get it.
I have yet to have somebody not show up for 3 days and not tell me what's going on, because they value the organization and their role within it. And so they're telling me what's going on. We're having a conversation. We've made plans about who picks up the slack for who, because that's okay in our organization because they know that in a little bit, they're going to need somebody to pick up the slack for them.
Yeah.
So if you're running a business like a family, like an entity that relies on each other and are codependent in the best way, interdependent, then you're not running into these these problems on a regular basis.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. We talked to Brian Calla the other day, and later on in that day, I saw an entrepreneur who is for paid sick leave, but talked about the headache that is going to cost her time and HR. Is this law cost prohibitive on the front end? Is the front cost a little too heavy for some small businesses to shoulder? Are there resources available?
Yeah, I don't know about resources, and I would love to talk to the legislature about that. Right? I think if we're going to do anything, there are talks and there are some scary language around the business community talking about repealing these acts, both this and minimum wage. I'd rather have a conversation like that around how do we make sure that people have the help they need to enact these on the front end. We've seen this happen in other states, right? We actually saw Governor Walz brag about it last night at the DNC because it is good for business. It's good for business to know that your people are protected, that they're not going to leave your organization to go to some other business because they have paid sick days and you don't. It's an even playing field. And we've researched this a lot. And when we talk about the cost of presenteeism, which people showing up for work but not actually able to produce, or the cost of training new people because they leave, it is much more expensive to not have these policies in effect.
Well, you talked about the convention. I think that's the perfect segue to talk about. What do you make of this convention?
So it is amazing. I will say that. Other than the fact that I'm an introvert and there were just people on all sides of me for every second, just to see hope come back.
Wait, you were there?
Oh, I was there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I was childcare issues. I was there for the first 2 days and my husband's there for the last 2 days. But so I was able to see Michelle and Barack, and you're just like, oh, I missed that. I missed the idea that we can talk about our values in the context of our vote, and not only our values as far as policies, but how we want a politician to show up. So it's been great. But also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, I'm disappointed that they're not going to let the uncommitted delegates speak, a Palestinian family or representative speak. That is a disappointment. And the fact that the convention is in Chicago, and the first time we had a convention in Chicago, there was this big anti-war sentiment. And I was like, we need to know that how the future is going to talk about us.
Never enough time with Danielle Atkinson, who is the founding director of Mothering Justice, a nonprofit that works to empower mothers of color. Danielle, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. Great conversation there from Orlando Bailey, Danielle Atkinson. Coming up, the Democratic National Convention is happening this week. We'll talk with the WDET reporter, Russ McNamara to be exact, who's been covering that event. You all stay right there. On 101.9 WDET FM, I am Tia Graham. Here this week with us on the Metro is Orlando Bailey, the executive director of Outlier Media. Hey. Orlando, we've been able to have quite a few really in-depth, always important conversations, but really in-depth, important conversations on important topics this week.
It's been rich.
It's been rich.
Rich.
Yes, and you've brought a lot of flavor to it. That's the richness there.
Thank you,
You're bringing
Tia.
That bone broth.
Oh, thank you, Tia. That
welcome.
means a lot to me. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. But, just thinking about what we just heard from Danielle and just hearing about the convention all week long, what are political conventions for anyway? Watched by the most committed voters, they are often candidates they offer candidates a chance to make their case to the American people about the most pressing issues facing the nation and the best solutions to those problems. This year's Democratic National Convention is currently taking place in Chicago, and right now there are a lot of Michiganders trying to influence that agenda. Already, United Auto Workers President Shawn Fain, Attorney General Dana Nessel, and State Senator Mallory McNamara have spoken at the convention. And tonight, Governor Whitmer is expected to speak. What have we learned thus far after 4 days of the convention, and how is the Democratic Party changing? And what does this say about the policy priorities of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz? To discuss all this now, we have WDET reporter and All Things Considered host, Russ McNamara. Russ, welcome back. I guess you're not back. You're on the road.
Hey, Russ.
Hello, friends. Oh, my goodness. I mean, Vicky Thomas, Malachi, Orlando. I mean, this is beautiful.
It's like the roll carpet, right? Just rolling out all the stars these past few weeks. But, Russ, you've been there for the whole entire convention. What has stood out to you so far during this convention?
Yeah, and Danielle Atkinson touched on this. I guess we should start with the undercurrent of protest that's been kind of going on in the background here in Chicago. The city is home to the largest number of Palestinian Americans, and I hopped off the L on Monday, and at least 10,000 people were marching to the convention. The United Center close by, but no, I mean, these protesters are not being allowed very close to the convention hall at all. So those voices maybe not being heard directly. The goal, I guess, is to get the U.S. to stop sending billions in military aid to Israel. The uncommitted national movement, with its ties deep in Michigan, is trying to bring that cause directly to the DNC itself and get that voice heard. I talked with Abbas Alawiya. He's a co-founder of the movement and an uncommitted delegate from Michigan. He says their cause is aligned with the Democratic base.
The overwhelming majority of Democratic voters, that the base of our party is clear on where we stand on this. We are going to have to force our elected officials to align with where the base of our party is. It's unfortunate that our elected officials aren't there yet. We're going to keep pushing.
Now, that was Abbas at the Democratic breakfast yesterday. And polling by Gallup kind of shows that nearly 3/4 of Democrats do not support Israel's military action in Gaza. Now, last night, outside the United Center, Alawiya and other uncommitted delegates staged a sit-in. He's still out there right now because they want a Palestinian American to speak at the DNC. He actually took a phone call mid-press conference from someone he said was an advisor to the DNC and Vice President Harris.
I've run out of options from my position as a delegate, and so I'm leaning into my power as a regular, everyday person, and I'm sitting here. And I'm not going anywhere, Roger. I'm not going anywhere. You all need to change your mind. I hope you change your mind. Call me if you change your mind.
So this is definitely not going away. The UAW has released a statement saying that they support a Palestinian American to speak tonight. I just talked with Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin, also a Senate candidate. She supports a Palestinian American speaking tonight, and it'll be interesting to see if the DNC relents.
Mm-hmm. So how has Michigan been represented at the convention?
They've been everywhere. They've been in the spotlight. State Senator McNamara of Royal Oak, she had a bit about Project 2025. Congressman Gary Peters came out on stage flanked by Teamsters, which was a direct shot at Teamsters President Sean O'Brien because he spoke at the Republican National Convention last month. Last night, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel spoke and had a pretty good line, I would say.
By the way, I got a message for the Republicans and the justices of the United States Supreme Court. You can pry this wedding band from my cold, dead, gay hand.
Oh.
Wow.
Oh. Okay.
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 Oh.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a good line. She's fiery. We all know this, having covered her in politics and both when she was a lawyer, now as Attorney General. So that's not really surprising that she would do that. And of course, Senate candidate Alyssa Slotkin and Governor Gretchen Whitmer are set to talk tonight. And I talked with Governor Whitmer one-on-one last night for the first time in years. And she says she's for some changes to the SOAR fund and how some of the money will be moved away from corporate incentives and more towards public transit. But honestly, the way that she has achieved rock star status among Democrats, everywhere she goes, she's mobbed by people. She can't really walk down the floor anywhere without drawing a lot of attention. So everyone wants to know what she'll be doing in 2 years when she's done as governor. She kind of gave a stock answer when I asked her about it. So I pushed her just a little bit and got this response.
I don't know. We'll see what happens. You know, I've got 3 generations of my family in the state of Michigan. I never plan to leave. What public service or what service looks like in the future, I cannot conceive of at the moment. But I do think it would be good to take a little bit of time. I've always wanted to go out west and see the national parks, just on a trip, not moving. But that's something that is on my list of things to do in 2027.
So I guess we'll see. But, you know, she was in the running for vice president for Joe Biden 4 years ago. You know, there was some talk this time around that she could take over the ticket. But, you know, she was hesitant, and she has close ties to both Joe Biden and Vice President Harris. But if Harris gets elected, her path to the White House is certainly cut off for a while. However, I do have to say, you can, if you need to, at the Democratic breakfast, they were selling her book, signed copies of her book for $40.
Our governor is certainly very well media trained. Russ, you mentioned the Teamsters were there. How has the United Auto Workers Union been represented?
Sean Fain has achieved his own level of rock star status. He's been everywhere. He and several members of the UAW are delegates from Michigan. So, and one thing kind of stood out to me. There's been a lot of talk about border security, migrants coming across the southern border to steal jobs. This has been a line that's been used by former President Donald Trump. Specifically, he says that they're stealing black jobs. At a reporter roundtable earlier this week, I asked him about that. It's like, why is the UAW not concerned about this? And this is what he had to say.
They're not taking nobody's jobs. They're being exploited. They're destitute and desperate people trying to find a better life. And when I see those people, I don't see them as an enemy. I don't see them as a threat to my job. The threat to our jobs is corporate greed.
Yeah. So that's this coming from a labor leader. So when you hear so much from some politicians, the difference in messaging is pretty remarkable.
And the point of the convention is, at least in part, to set a policy agenda. The Harris campaign got a late start, so it hasn't had much time to do that, as far as you can tell. What are the policies being put forth by her campaign at this point, Russ? We got about 30 to 40 seconds.
I won't need that long. No, we are very light on policy at this point. You kind of know, but you don't kind of know. She hasn't really distanced herself from President Joe Biden, I think mainly out of respect. But we haven't gotten a really deep look at what she wants to do. She wants to help drop food prices and kind of go after greedflation, going after corporations that are, you know, artificially raising the prices of certain goods. But really, that's it. More cutting of pharmaceutical prices. But yeah, that's all we really know so far.
WDET's Russ McNamara and the host of All Things Considered, Russ McNamara, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro. Once again, we will look forward to following all of your reporting throughout this entire election season. Talk to you soon, Russ.
Love you guys.
Love you back. All right. That's the Metro for Thursday, August 21st. You can listen to recent episodes online at WDET.org, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. The show is also on YouTube if you like listening that way.
And if you are a listener, don't forget, the WDET listener survey is back. We want to hear from you. What do you think of the Metro? Believe me, we read every single one. Share your thoughts, and you could win some cool WDET swag. It's quick, it's anonymous, and you'll be helping us serve you better. Take that survey now, WDET.org/survey.
All right. The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. If you like what you hear and want to support the Metro, consider becoming a member at WDET.org/donate.
The show is produced by Sam Corey, David Lyons, and Jack Philbrandt. Our engineer, Nate Bender, and music's done by Sam Bobian and Will Sessions. This is WDET FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Thank you so much for listening. Orlando will be back tomorrow, and I will as well.